Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our ISG HR Peer and Market Pulse series. We've taken a few weeks off because Julie, Stacy, and I, as well as many of you, have been busy attending the fall HR conferences. And so we thought we'd come back together today and share some of the highlights, some of our perspective on the fall this year's conference season. And so let's get into it. We had posted a couple of polls up on our digital HR connections site on LinkedIn. And so thanks to all of you who participated. And the first one was a technology related one. So we asked, what is a priority for HR technology spend in 2021? And we've got the results here on the slide. You can see employee feedback and engagement came in the lead with end-to-end HCM SaaS and talent solutions kind of neck and neck behind that, and virtual assistants and chatbots. So when we take a look at some of the technology themes that came out at the fall HR conferences, I think it connects and resonates pretty well to our poll here. Certainly, employee feedback, engagement, and overall employee experience has continued to be a theme, and we saw that in the technology themes and solutions that were discussed at the conferences. Continued discussion around experience suites and workflow and how to kind of enhance the HCM system with those types of tools and technology. And then, probably not surprisingly, in this continued environment that we've been in for 2020, a lot of emphasis on digital and connectedness and collaboration. So, whether it's through mobile tools and mobile enablement to help employees be able to work from anywhere, or through collaboration tools and some of the, big emergence of, MS Teams, Workplace by Facebook, to help employees be able to be more connected in this time when we're all still virtual, or many of us are still virtual. Those were definitely themes from my perspective from, the technology related themes that I saw from coming out of the conferences. Julie, Stacy, how about you guys? What are some of the things you noticed?
Yes, I think it was really interesting to see the end-to-end cloud, HR cloud activities, which we've been focusing on for so long, has kind of an underlying theme of an integrated suite, right? Or trying to get as many of those parts together and functioning together to create experience as possible. And yet, if you saw Josh Berson's opener, the keynote to the HR Tech Conference, it was a parade of logos for different technologies. And I think that's partly because in addition to the core, getting to the cloud, we're seeing a lot more point solutions, apps, niche solutions and specialized providers that are really tackling different parts or different value propositions around talent. Stacy, what do you think? Being kind of our talent expert, you think does that make sense? Is that what you noticed?
Yeah, there's definitely a continued proliferation around the logos, particularly in spaces like talent acquisition, like learning, a lot of innovation that is happening both within the HCM as well as outside of it. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of, great innovation that's happening. I'd say, when we look at here, some of the polls and the key themes that Kelly outlined, I think very consistent, with what we saw in the conferences, with what we're seeing. As we look at things like the employee feedback and engagement, employee burnout has been such an important, issue this year, with just the sheer volumes of, meetings and workloads and having to do more with less. And so really focusing on people during this time, how do we make sure we're getting feedback from employees? How are we having the ongoing dialogue, with our teams? That's certainly a critical issue. For some of that broader technology, such as the end-to-end kind of HCM, and some of the experience suites, that's also, certainly a big priority for organizations, just needing, better productivity and how do we accelerate some of our, capability coming out of the pandemic, and, the explosion of some of these collaboration tools and, really focused around how do we help operate more effectively virtually and how do we make the work experience better for our employees. And from a talent perspective, there's a lot going on that we saw at conferences too, in terms of organizations looking to just redesign a lot of their talent practices, with the changing dynamics in the workforce, the labor market, reskilling, there's a lot going on in terms of how do we better, relook at, how we're conducting our hiring practices, our, performance, our career management, our leadership development, kind of all of those areas are undergoing some significant shifts. And then certainly a big theme we saw at a lot of the conferences here, was around the resilience and agility. It's been a huge theme throughout, really, I'd say this year. And so with a lot of changes in terms of how organizations are operating, how some of the work's being performed, the speed at which the business is moving, there's, a lot of focus on how do we effectively support that from an HR perspective. So I think that leads us, Kelly, to the next slide and some of the themes around the broader transformation.
Yeah, thanks, Stacey. Yeah, let's take a look kind of beyond the technology, right, at the broader transformational themes. And we had a poll out there around the transformation as well. And so when we asked which areas you would be focusing on for 2021 from a transformation perspective, the top two answers here, mindset and vision, and people and audience came in the lead. Process and journey behind that, and then surprisingly, right, for all the talk we just had around technology and technology solutions, that was at the bottom, right? So, Julie, maybe do you have some perspective on that?
Yeah, in fact, this was a poll that we posted just as HR Tech was happening, and I pulled the categories straight from a session that Jason Averbrook did. He's the Leap Gen guy, and he had a keynote session that was talking about the digital equation and what percentage of effort was put into each of these categories as HR is looking at the digital equation, and in his digital equation, which probably had a greater sample set than what we usually poll from week to week, technology was only 10%. And, we just came out of a poll here on the last slide that talked about all the different technology levers, right? Enablers, apps. There's just so much happening in the technology space. It's striking, I think, in some respects to see that so low, right, at 10%. And so I wanted to replicate that a little bit in our polls and see if we got a similar kind of a similar result. And look, we did, right? And, I think that's reflecting more than the idea that HR, some people will say HR is just, focused on the people-y stuff or the soft side of things. That's our focus. Those are our priorities. But it's interesting to see, that even as we focus on going digital, our mind share and our approach and the way that we look at this is really centered in the outcomes and the impact and the experience and the journey that people will have throughout the experience.
Yeah, I agree, Julie. I think it does, this does reflect some of the importance that we just talked about, some of the key themes around the people, around resilience, and really the recognition of how organizations operate, how the work is performed, are such critical components of success, in the future HR organization.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I think, the other thing, we can't come out of this conference season without a little bit of discussion around the virtual conference experience. I mean, it was new and different for everyone. And I think there were good and bad, right? Some pros and cons with that. So I know we had a little bit of chatter on our LinkedIn page about the on-demand format. And I think that was great. It's really nice to be able to view the sessions, to not have to worry about, choose between two sessions that you really want to attend. A lot of the content was available beyond just the dates of the conference. So if you want to, watch one in the evening or catch one later, that was available to folks. And the other great thing was that many of the conferences were free, or there were no limits on attendance at all. So, where typically organizations need to send one or two folks and make some choices. It was really broadly available to everyone to be able to participate as they were able. And so I think, more folks in organizations, ours included, got the ability to participate in the same conferences, and which is really great, and to be able to give that exposure to more people. Maybe kind of on the con side, I think the three of us certainly had networking experiences, and that was a little bit more of a struggle to be able to do that in the virtual setting. it's just, I think when you're all together at the conference, there's just, you walk out of a session and strike up a conversation with someone, next to you about what's going on in your organization. There's some of those more natural opportunities, or just, the energy of all being together on the networking floor and the vendor floor and walking around and talking to folks. So a little bit harder to generate that same level of energy, and takes a little more effort to get some of those networking opportunities, I think, at least from my perspective. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on the virtual experience.
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of those points. I think the virtual format, I agree, it was a great opportunity just to engage more members of the team, and, could be a real, nice learning and development opportunities for some folks, and get access to some of the intelligence. And certainly the on-demand format is helpful, assuming you can get back to, to listening to them. I think in general, kind of found the shorter is better in terms of being able to try to have shorter formats for some of these. But, clearly, I think these conferences will remain virtual for some period of time. And so I do think, that the hosts have tried to better engage the audiences and get some more interactive elements, whether it's sort of the chat or the polling or some of the Q&A, panels, and using things like the attendee directories or some of the private messaging and virtual meeting channels helps. I do still think there's opportunities to try to improve some of the networking capabilities, because I think that is just, such an area, where HR professionals, can benefit. And I think in general do a really nice job, HR, of trying to network with others and understand some of the best practices. But so overall, I think, virtual conferences were still definitely a good way to keep abreast of the market, and try some virtual networking and walk away with some new ideas, hopefully.
Yep, totally agree. Definitely seem to be more pros than cons. And if we see anything, we see that the virtual conference experience, just like everything else in 2020, has been disrupted. And there's kind of it puts a new value proposition on attending or formats and exactly how you do a conference. That will surely carry into 2021. I haven't seen yet any stats on how many attendees, actually stick with the sessions versus seeing the replays afterwards. I think we'll hear more about that, and how many actually wander the exhibit halls, because you can no longer, force all the food and meals to happen in those spaces to get that kind of traffic generated. So, beyond a doubt, in the virtual conference world, service providers, sponsors kind of fund these things, and they're there for the networking as well as anyone else. And with reduced interaction, does that mean there's more mailing lists, as part of that value proposition, or how do you also make sure that that they continue to fund and support people getting together? I think many folks think that well, you no longer have to rent the venue and you no longer have to do the meals, and but there's a whole different aspect of this that is doing the marketing, the digital marketing, and videos, and kind of doing all the things you can do to keep people's interest and attract and make it fun and engaging. That take people and take production cost. So, just, again, completely shifted the value proposition. We've been working for a little while now. Kelly, if you flip the slide, on networking and peer networking, what started out as between conferences and keeping up momentum, is growing. And we're really trying to incorporate more, not only short blasts of content like this, but also opportunities and a place where, kind of vendor-free, sales-free, HR leaders like yourselves can network with peers, can, post and talk about what it is that they're working on, and, and hear from your peer network outside of any particular virtual event. So, please feel free to join us. It's, kind of just beginning and building and trying to build that interactivity. And you can just look for Digital HR Connections in your LinkedIn search and request to join. You have to request and be let in. That's how we, focus really on the practitioner and the HR leader community. So thanks, everyone. And we hope to see you next week, and hope to see you in the Digital HR Connections site, where we can generate some conversations. Have a great week.